Hello, I'm Cressida and I'm reading How to Train Your Dragon, and we've just got to a really interesting bit. Hiccup is about to tell everybody what his fiendishly clever plan is. Chapter 14, the fiendishly clever plan is to get rid of those dragons, those huge dragons that are sitting on Burke. The dragons protested a bit, but the boys yelled them into line. All except for Toothless, who absolutely refused to join in. Look at Toothless refusing. I love his refusing expression. You must be joking, said the little dragon, stammered the little dragon. I refuse to go anywhere near a sea dragon as Gigantus Maximus. Those things are dangerous. I should stay here and watch you all. Hiccup coaxed, and he threatened, and he bribed in vain. You see, said Snotlout, the useless can't even get his own dragon to carry out his pathetic plan. And this is the person you are banking on to get you out of this mess? Ugh, said Dogsworth the Doorbrain. Oh, shut up, Snotlout, chorused the rest of the boys. Hiccup sighed and gave up. OK then, Toothless, you just stay here and miss all the fun. Now, I want everybody to go down to the gull's nesting place and collect as many birds' feathers as you can for the feather bombs. Birds' feathers? Scoffed Snotlout. This wimp thinks you can fight an animal like that with birds' feathers? Cold steel is the only language a creature like that would understand. Dragons have a tendency to asthma, explained Hiccup. It's all that fire breathing they do. The smoke gets in their lungs. So you think that monster is going to die from asthma right then and there because of a few feather bombs? Sneered Snotlout. Why not just feed him fried herring and see whether he drops dead of a heart attack in 20 years or so? Said Snotlout. No, said Hiccup patiently. The feather bombs are just to make him very confused so he won't kill us in the meantime. Snotlout, Thuggery, I'm going to need to coach Farworm and Killer in what they have to say, continued Hiccup. I'm not putting my dragon at risk in this crazy plan, said Snotlout. Oh, yes, you are, boomed Thuggery, through gritted teeth, brandishing a massive fist at Snotlout. This guy is such a pain, Hiccup. I don't know why you put up with him. Listen, snot features, by some miracle, you've got yourself a reasonable dragon. You get that dragon to do what Hiccup says, or I will personally boot you all the way to Porpoise Point and back again. OK, then, said Snotlout crossly, but don't blame me when we all get barbecue because of the useless's mad idea. I don't think Snotlout's on board here. Hiccup supervised the making of the feather bombs. The boys gathered great armfuls of feathers from the gull's nesting place. They then burgled every item of material they could find. Goggletoad's nappies, Gobber's pyjamas, Mogadon the Meathead's tent, Valhalorama's bra, anything they could get their hands on. The grown-ups were too busy consulting among themselves to take any notice. Snotlout cheered up a bit because he could show off his superior skill at burglary. OK, there is Baggy Bum's hairy knickers and Valhalorama's extra strong heavy-duty bra. There, they're going to use them for the feather bombs. Hang on. Oh yes, Snotlout cheered up a bit because he could show off his superior skill at burglary. He managed to steal Baggy Bum's knickers right off him as he was standing in a huddle discussing a plan of action. Baggy Bum didn't notice, not even when he reached a hairy hand down to absent-mindedly scratch his great bottom. He was too busy talking about bigger and better methods of yelling. The boys then wrapped the feathers up in the material so that they would fly out when the bombs were dropped. Each team of 10 boys was armed with about 100 of these feather bombs, wrapped in a great parcel made out of an old sail. Hiccup led the hooligans towards the long beach, whereas Thuggery took the meatheads to Unlandable Cove. The thin column of boys were excitedly chattering as they set off behind Hiccup, Warthog and Clueless, dragging the sail at the rear, the dragon circling and diving a couple of feet above their heads. Vikings are practically fearless, having been bred up to be soldiers, so even Hiccup and Fishlegs had a surge of excitement at the thought of the battle to come. But as soon as the monster came into sight again, the boys and the dragons instantly dropped to their tummies and squirmed forward, hearts beating hard. It was impossible that anything could be that big. Hiccup led them as near as he dared to the edge of the cliff surrounding the long beach. They looked down on the terrible creature snoring in front of them. His nostrils alone were as big as 6 front doors, and the stench leaking out of them made it difficult for the boys to breathe. Warthog, who had always had a delicate stomach, threw up disgustingly in the heather. Hiccup, Fishlegs and Clueless unwrapped the feather bombs and gave one to each boy. The boys called the dragon and called the dragons as softly as they could, and each put a feather bomb in their dragon's mouth. They then stood up at the edge of the cliff with their dragons on the end of their outstretched arms like that. They had them on their arms like that. Look, that's maybe Worm carrying a feather bomb there. Okay. This took about the same amount of bravery as it might take you to leap off a mountain at 1,000 feet. Even with the monster fast asleep, the natural reaction was to keep hidden in the bracken. Hiccup tried not to breathe in. He lifted his arm to give the command to begin. "Go!" whispered Hiccup. "Go!" yelled back the boys. And the dragons flew up and circled round the vast sleeping head. Just as the Green Death inhaled, Hiccup shouted, "Now!" and the dragons let go of the feather bombs. The Green Death took in a breath that was half air and half feathers. He woke with a gigantic sneeze, and as he shuddered and coughed, Fireworm, who was treading air right next to his right ear, gave a speech which went something like this, but far more irritating. "Greetings, O sea dragonus pusillanimous minimus, from my father, the terror of the seas. He is feeling like feasting on the barbarians, and if you get in his way, he will feast on you. Swim away, little sea slug, and you'll be safe. But stay on this island, and you will feel the sharpness of his claws and the fierceness of his fire." That's very, very tricky of them, isn't it? Now, this is Fireworm leading the way there in Operation Sneeze Attack. There are the dragons, all carrying the feather bombs in Operation Sneeze Attack. The giant monster tried to laugh sarcastically and cough at the same time, but this is virtually impossible, and a feather went down the wrong way, making him cough even more. Then Fireworm bit him on the nose. It must have felt like a flea bite, but the monster was outraged. Through streaming eyes, the Green Death made a swipe at this irritating dragon flea and missed. One giant claw tore down part of the cliff face instead. The 9 other dragons, by this time, the 9 other dragons had returned to collect more feather bombs from the boys on the cliffs. "Now!" yelled Hiccup, and with split-second timing, they let their bombs fly. They hit their target of the Green Death's nostrils, and he collapsed with coughing again. "You cannot win, puny worm," crowed Fireworm. "Wriggle back to the sea where you belong, and let my master have his supper." And now the Green Death was really cross. He bounded lopsidedly after Fireworm, trying to bat away this irritating little speck of a dragon with his claws. But the Green Death had the same sort of difficulty catching Fireworm that you might have if you tried to catch a blue bottle with your bare hands. Dragons are better than humans at that sort of game, but the Green Death kept on missing because his eyes were streaming so much because of the sneezing. "Missed again," sneered Fireworm, enjoying herself hugely, and she flapped just out of reach of the Green Death's claws as he swiped at her. The Green Death made another wild leap towards her, But as Fireworm flew on around the corner of the cliffs, steering the monster in the direction of Unlandable Clove. And remember what is at Unlandable Clove? I begin to see Hiccup's fiendishly clever plan. Hiccup and the boys ran after them as fast as they could, but they hadn't a hope of keeping up. Running through heather is not unlike running through knee-deep treacle, and they kept disappearing up to their knees in the bog. As Fireworm and the monster got further and further ahead in their race along the shoreline, it took longer and longer for the other dragons to fly back to the boys and return with more feather bombs. The military commanders among you will recognise the kind of problems that come when a supply line can no longer reach the forces at the front. Eventually, it was taking so long to reload that there came a moment when there was no more feathers tickling the Green Death's nostrils, and his eyes stopped streaming, and suddenly he could see the maddening Fireworm pinpoint clear. The Green Death made a lightning reflex swipe at the Red Dragon and caught her in one gigantic claw. It was lucky for Fireworm at this very moment that the Purple Death, remember the Purple Death, came crashing round the corner and struck the Green Death heavily in the stomach. His grip loosened on Fireworm for a second, and she flew off, panting with relief. The Green Death sat down heavily in the sea and fought for breath. The Purple Death did very much the same. Getting very exciting. Next chapter is chapter 15, The Battle at Death's Head Headland. But we'll have to listen to that tomorrow.